This is Yeshua's teaching in the Capernaum synagogue. And it is on the last day and the resurrection. He will be the one that raises us. And when the sun set that night and the trumpet blew, announcing the feast that begins on a day and hour that no man knows, the day of the resurrection, there were Jews out in the fields working, and Gentiles working on a normal time. Of course, this year they were not, because everyone was in the synagogue. It was on the Sabbath day. They were at rest if they weren't in the synagogues. But the Gentiles were out there in the field working. But when that trumpet blew, that moment was a high Sabbath. It was a day of trumpets. It's a feast that occurs when nobody knows, but you must be ready. You must have your garments washed, just as it was at Mount Sinai. Moses came down and said, okay, you've got 3 days. Get everything ready. Get your garments washed, get them ironed out, get everything prepared, food, everything is prepared ahead of time. And when you hear that trumpet blow, you put on your white garments, and then we will go to the base of the mountain in the presence of the Almighty, and that is when the commandments were shouted down. On that day. And we were told that we are to remember that day. The day the trumpets blew and the day of that shouting. Leviticus 23 says, on the first day of the 7th month, you shall have a memorial of the blowing of trumpets. You will remember the day that those trumpets blew. You put on your white garments and you were in the presence of the Almighty. You remember that day. And you're to remember it on the first day of the 7th month. Because the feast of the Lord are all prophetic shadow pictures of good things to come. Yeshua came the first time as the suffering servant. As the prophet, we must shema. He laid down the rules of the kingdom, and we are required to hear and obey him. Those who hear and obey and come to him, he will. On the last day, he will be the one that raises them from the dead. He came the first time and fulfilled the spring feast of the Lord. His body was broken, his body, which is the bread of life. His blood was shed and paid the atoning sin sacrifice, paid the death penalty for the broken covenant at Mount Sinai. His broken body and his shed blood were accomplished in the fulfillment of the spring feast. But yet, the fall feast will have intermediate and final fulfillments, and the day of trumpets is the day of the resurrection. And Yeshua is now putting his endorsement and showing us and showing his followers that if you keep his calendar, the Creator's calendar, and you celebrate this feast and you focus in on this, that you will understand that the fall feast will be fulfilled, and that's what the book of the Revelation is all about, the Messiah fulfilling the fall feast. Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, and the first 2 chapters of Acts is Yeshua fulfilling the spring feast. He will fulfill the fall feast, and he will rule this earth with a rod of iron.